idea of starting a YouTube channel for some time now, and I've yet to pull the trigger on it for a number of different reasons. But I figured with it being the start of the new year, I'd ride the coattails of New Year's resolutions and finally start. Overall, I miss the joy of making stuff, but I'm still having a really hard time getting started. I've had to put my investigative hat on to figure out why it feels like this massive amount of resistance to just make a video and put it on the internet. People do this every single day, and yet here I am with a background in production, my own equipment, and time. Arguably 3 of the biggest obstacles, and yet I'm still finding excuses for why I can't start. So I figured I'd try to get to the bottom of this mystery and answer the question, why is it so hard getting started? Over the last year of thinking about starting a YouTube channel, I have watched a lot of other creators. And while watching copious amounts of other people's work can be oh so inspiring and teach you a lot, it is a slippery slope into the comparison game. I thought that if I just learned enough, I'd hit this point where I would feel ready to begin. And while it's taught me a lot, it hasn't made getting started any easier. In fact, it's made putting something out there even more intimidating. Now, in my logical brain, I know that these creators that I admire did not wake up one morning and become the top-notch creators they are within that same day. Their portfolios are the result of practicing a skill over an extended period of time. They worked hard, they practiced. But there's this other part of me that I can't quite outmaneuver with logic. And it's this fear of being average. You see, over the past year of watching all of these creators, not only have I been learning, but I've been daydreaming. Daydreaming about what my work is gonna look like in 5-10 years' time when I've put in the same work as them. And I've gotten really comfortable living in this daydream. But this fantasy has to come to an end because it's delaying the reality of looking at where I actually am. Let me introduce you to this concept that I call the gap. And it basically goes like this. I know that there's a gap between where I am versus where I want to be. But the problem is I don't actually know where I am in this diagram. I don't have a baseline. And I'm afraid to get a baseline because I can't guarantee that I'm gonna be excellent at something before I've ever even attempted it. I'm declaring myself a failure before I've even started. Imagine getting invited to a party that you really wanna go to, but you don't know how to get there. So you do what any normal person would do. You pull out your phone and you type it into Maps. Now imagine never even bothering to put your location in to see how far it's gonna take you to get to this party because you're afraid it's gonna be too far and you'll never be able to get there. Directions only work if Google or Apple know exactly where you are so they can tell you which direction you need to move, right? This party could be 3 hours away, and yeah, that would really suck to get there. But you don't actually know that. But also, this party could be right down the street, 10 minutes away, and you're stressing over not being able to get there when it's totally within reach. You're just too afraid to look. I'm ready to stop wondering where I am in these two analogies, to actually put my pin on the map and see where I am so I can start taking action and closing the gap. But I think what's taken me so long in wanting to take action and not being able to has been because a lot of the hurdles that I'm experiencing have been happening on a subconscious level, meaning the problems have just been invisible to me. Despite wanting to take action, I feel like I kept getting tripped up because I didn't know where to take action. Now, I want to be fully honest and not make it sound like I'm presenting these solutions as if I've implemented them perfectly and I'm now on the other side of it reporting back. These are revelations that I've had as of recently, and I've been able to finally put language around it, and I'm just wanting to share that with you. And I'm hoping that by sharing that with you, if you're wanting to take action and you feel like you're just getting tripped up and you can't take that first step, maybe this would help. Block number 1, Fear of failure. I have a tendency to hyperfixate on everything that can go wrong, and I set incredibly high expectations for myself. And so anytime I feel like I can't quite live up to that expectation, I'm spinning, my brain is spinning constantly, coming up with as many solutions to problems that probably won't even occur. Spending so much mental bandwidth on all of the ways that I could miss the mark is just amplifying the problem, making it so much bigger than it needs to be, and making it feel safer to not even try. I saw a quote within the last couple weeks that came across my inbox, and I thought it was super relevant to exactly this problem, and I wanted to share. It reads, "Every act of conscious learning requires the willingness to suffer an injury to one's esteem. That is why young children, before they are aware of their own self-importance, learn so easily, and why older persons, especially if vain or important, cannot learn at all." This is from the wise words of Dylan O'Sullivan. One of the things that I've started doing as of recently is trying to picture the worst case scenario. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive based on what I just said a minute ago, but what I mean by that is try to identify, why do I feel so scared to not live up to those expectations? What am I afraid is going to actually happen? And if I can actually get to that root, is that scarier than being in the same position a year from now? When I actually sat with this, I realized that being cringe out in public with a camera, or putting my work out there and it not being good enough, or just needing more practice, is scary. It is uncomfortable, but what makes it worse, what would be worse for me, is to look back a year from now and still not having taken any action. That truly is the worst case scenario for me. Seeing it black and white like that tipped the scales just so slightly to make the action seem like the easier option. Block number 2, perfectionism. This is super similar to the fear of failure, but the reason I identify it as separate is because the biggest block for me is wanting to be seen as excellent from time number 1. Fresh out the gate, I'm an expert. And this unrealistic expectation is preventing me from taking any sort of action because I have this incredibly unrealistic expectation of myself. I'm not allowing myself to go through the process of learning. Now, the process of learning is uncomfortable. And I think we may have kind of forgotten this as we become adults, but think back to when we were kids and you were learning how to read. It's super uncomfortable and it's really frustrating. I think for me, it's just been really hard to get comfortable with the idea of being seen frustrated, to be seen struggling, and especially going into a super public realm like YouTube, I'm gonna struggle, and I'm gonna struggle publicly. Now, I wanna clarify something. I don't think it's a bad thing to have high expectations. Shoot for the moon, have high goals, I'm all for it. But I think the problem lies with having really high expectations without having any sort of realistic strategy on how to achieve them. That for me has been the disconnect. Now, if it isn't obvious already, I love quotes, and I have another one that I wanted to share that also came across my email while trying to make this video. So it reads like this: "People can sometimes be held hostage by their expectations. They have this dream of something that they would like to achieve or a path that they intend to follow, but their mindset falls apart when things don't work out how they had hoped. The key is to reach for an extremely high bar, but be adaptable enough to reframe the failures, disappointments, and defeats into fuel for the next thing. Give your best effort, but no matter how it works out, trust that life will be good for you. Focus on how the world is working for you, not against you. Everything that you are given is material for the next move. Everything." That's James Clear. I really like that quote because it packs a lot of really practical information and good advice into one passage. And the biggest thing that I really am trying to take away from that is to approach things with more levity. I'm working on being kinder to myself, on acknowledging that I do have a bunch of emotions that are coming up: disappointment, anger, frustration, confusion, but not letting it completely derail me. I want to recognize that I have feelings, but I also want to acknowledge the impermanence of these feelings. Nothing bad or scary or uncomfortable is going to last forever, and I can get through it. Also, in the same vein, I want to recognize that so much of what is driving my perfectionism, this desire to be seen, a certain way is outside of my control. The only thing I can control is how I respond to a situation. The only thing I can control is how I let my emotions dictate my actions. So, for example, I can control how I respond when I've hit my 100th snag making this video. I can't control how this video actually is perceived. Block number 3, overwhelm, or just not really knowing how to get started. I'm a planner. I find a great deal of comfort in controlling details and mitigating risk. But when you venture into the unknown, you're trying something completely new, there's a lot of unknowns. How long is something going to take you? How much work is it going to be? How expensive is it going to be? Will I even like it? Now for me, making this video might be tremendously hard, take me a ton of time, and I may not even like it in the end. But the only way to actually know that is by doing. Something that I've been doing recently that I have actually found really helpful is to break things down, to give shape, some parameters to these unknowns, and then just tackle one task at a time instead of trying to figure out everything all at once. Now, another thing that I think is important to note is adding this additional element of trust. Trust that you will figure it out. There are so many things that are going to happen that you just can't even prepare for because you don't know about them. But what you can do is trust that when they happen, you will figure it out. Block number 4, distractions. Like I mentioned earlier, the process of learning is uncomfortable. There's really no getting around it. And in my opinion, I feel like in a lot of ways, modern living has afforded us ways to escape the uncomfortable and make life more convenient. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but I think I've gotten kind of used to not sitting with hard stuff for a long period of time. If things are uncomfortable, there's so many ways to escape. YouTube, scrolling social media, watching a movie, there's a million examples. But actually just sitting with the hard and going through it without checking out is really challenging. But unfortunately in life, there's not an app or convenient service or a way to escape going through hard things. So one of the things that I'm working on is trying to eliminate some of these distractions. Every time I have a setback, instead of checking out or throwing in the towel for the day, take a breath, reset, and keep trying. And another thing that I've been implementing, which for a lot of you, it's probably super obvious. I don't know why it wasn't for me, but actually set a routine. By setting a routine, by having habits that support the goal that you're trying to implement, has been such a game changer. I find that I'm making progress without really having to think about it. I'm just kind of doing it. And I've found that to be so encouraging, and starting to build momentum fuels you to keep with the routine. Obviously, I'm not doing it perfectly, and there's probably things that are going to have to change in the future as I start to figure things out a little bit better, but it got me to just start moving, and I think that that was the whole point. So I'll take it as a win. In conclusion, I honestly think the hardest part of getting started is just getting started, going from 0 to 1. And then once you know it's possible, going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 and so on and so forth become so much more believable, so much more manageable. Once you start doing, it's easy to start building momentum. Well, maybe not easy, but more believable. And so I just wanted to share some of my findings in the event that somebody on the internet found this helpful. If you're also wanting to take action and you're just finding it impossible to get started, I'm hopeful that some of the tips that I shared in this video will at least help you pinpoint one area that you can start taking action in. And I just want to let you know, you've got this. I'm right there with you. We'll figure it out together, and I'll see you in the next one.